complicated, you know, man. I got dang old Rubik's Cube, man. You like talking about blue, red, man, then you get to one side and like messed up.
All right, Dimes, Judas, welcome to the Jay Burden Show. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right, thank you.
I'm very glad to be here. Can I just say this? I really like that intro. I don't think I've seen it before. I've only seen clips. That's a fantastic intro.
I have watched it actually, and the first time that I did see it, I didn't make the association with your name, but I was thinking at the time, damn, that is a fine intro.
Okay, see what you're seeing right here is a classic Judas devilish trick. Talk like, oh, I've seen it before. Oh, I've been into Jay Burden for a long time. Don't fucking believe it. This will not be the first time he does this time. All right, go ahead.
I don't know. It was convincing. I believe it.
That's how it gets you.
So that intro, it's a funny story. That intro took me forever because I'm not, incredibly technical, and Adobe After Effects is an absolute bear of a program to wrestle around if you're used to different programs. And so it's not a particularly difficult one because essentially what I did is, are you guys familiar with what AMVs are?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're anime music videos, and they got kind of popular in the like mid 2000s with like kind of cringe, Dragon Ball Green Day edits.
Buddy, we are old. What are we? 30-year-old boomers. We're aged.
No, I'm explaining that to my audience, right?
Yeah, like
you guys would know.
I know, because you have to understand how important that was for the development of this generation that we're in. So Zoomers don't have that. They don't know what it's like to be really invested in like a Super Saiyan montage set to Linkin Park.
Well, see, I grew up with my own, and it was just, it was like SoundCloud rap edits to Boruto, but I was thinking, I was like, I can't figure out this program. Who is someone who knows how to edit and isn't very smart? I was like, the people who make AMVs. So I'll just look up AMV tutorials. And that's how I made that intro.
We got to be mining these people. Like, there's a lot of wisdom in this. By the way, I should have asked this. How lewd and cruel are we allowed to get with our language? Can we curse? I'm not going to get you in trouble with any. Okay. How deep can we plumb the depths of this retardation to bring up the jewels?
Give it to me in Scoville units, please.
I would say this was like just pure, capsaicin oil, right? Like it was just enough to send you into anaphylactic shock.
Oh, perfect.
Because I remember it. It was literally this guy, and the guy sounded out of his mind high, and you could tell he was recording it on his like high school ThinkPad, telling. And I was like, oh, perfect. This is exactly at my level. If a 15-year-old with a mental disability can explain it, I can probably figure it out.
I was laughing the other day about the wretched projects that we could engage in if we were in high school. Like you and me, Judas, in high school, if we had the technology that's available to people now. Because all we had back then on school computers was like Doom. We could install Doom and maybe trick some teachers. But the ability to have Hollywood grade technology for film edits, it would only be used for bullying, by the way.
Oh, of course. And that's what Photoshop was for people my age. Because with like a pirated Russian copy of Photoshop and maybe like 15 minutes of YouTube tutorials, you can like edit your friends into every historical like, tragedy that's ever happened. It's like, look, you're at Nanking. Like you've got a severed Chinese head in your hand.
You start photoshopping, look, you're in the Third Reich, and that just confirmed a bunch of people. What was funny though? We talked about this on the show because everyone's talking about AI and deepfakes and everything, and we were just going back and forth laughing at the idea of the technology, the highly advanced technology to create a deepfake or create, you plug in the text and it comes out. Now Joe Rogan can say whatever, Hillary Clinton can say whatever. How the teams of engineers, data scientists that were required to do this. And if I imagine myself as the investor or the marketing executive, whatever, someone's pitching me this idea, I need to know, how is this used for anything other than bullying? Like, there's literally no application for deepfake technology. If you're the CEO of that company, again, $10 million to create it. What is the application other than either bullying or blackmail? I don't know what it is.
You have to really reach. Yeah.
Well, it's exactly. It's truly the refutation of the thesis of universal basic income. It's like we give people limitless freedom. Surely they will become the next Shakespeare. And in reality, it's just like, haha, I made Joe Rogan say the N-word for 10 hours.
Yeah, the first minute of the first day that technology rolls out, it's Hillary Clinton saying she wants Obama as a slave. Why wouldn't that be the first thing that happens?
Exactly. And there is a Jay Burden AI out there that says all manner of horrible things. And it instantly, as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, I better not get doxxed, because if so, there's all the stuff I have said and all the things that I haven't said, but someone thought it would be funny if I had.
Well, you know what's funny? That we talked about this on the show, not often, but it's a developing story, obviously. But one strategy that we were playing around with was, for not even for your average dissident, but for your average citizen, the idea that if there is so much, not only is the government spying on you, obviously, but there's this ability for blackmail from either federal or private interest, you would have to flood the internet with evidence of you saying and doing everything to the point that it devalues all digital information of you. So there's you, and also a deepfake of you admitting that you're gay, admitting that you're trans, admitting that you're black, just everything. So there's such a fog of data around you that everything people come forward with by saying, look, I found him saying this, is treated with suspicion.
Yeah,
I think that might be
like
the only way to do it.
Broad spectrum, like contradictory information, so that for any one piece of information, somebody might want to use it as evidence, right? There's like two other pieces that are contradictory. So yeah, there is a defense mechanism, but that's a whole other service. I mean, that's like the next step. Nobody's gone there yet, but call it a prediction.
It's almost, you're turning the internet into the Ganges. It's just full of trash and shit and needles. And it's like Indian guys just floating down. Like, that's all the internet's going to be if I have my way.
Mm-hmm.
So you're telling me that there's a Dimes bot out there just sending Bobs and Vagine?
Yeah. What the bit that we had on the show? Remember this, Juice? Remember Trans Dimes?
Yeah.
So we got a vocoder. It's the service anyone can get. What was it called? Audio Mod, something like that. But there's and they might not even have this anymore, but you could make your voice sound like a robot, sound like a monster, whatever, the auto tune. But then there's one female to male and male to female. And then so we had a recurring character called Trans Dimes. And the character went as far as me saying, "Hey everybody, it's me, Trans Dimes." That was about it, but that was enough because you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But you would point out, just that it doesn't just up pitch your voice; it adds like a warmth and softness. It's really chilling.
It adds a little inflection, like when you finish a word when in the dead space. It adds an inflection, and then it also gives a little lisp, like it lengthens the S's, and it's weird how subtle it is, but it makes you want to vomit. Like listening to it. It's
what
awful.
It makes you sound like no joke. I'm not using this as a dig, but also who gives a shit. It makes you sound like Philosophy Tube. It sounds like a man who like added something to his throat, and it's like a soft throatiness. Anyway, so I got Trans Dimes, is what I'm saying. So I'm gonna have all these other personas that just flood the sensors.
Well, in a weird way, it is truly kind of the death of the real, right? It's like kind of mutually assured destruction where almost there's so much, like you said, there's so many kind of like clips of everyone saying everything that, it comes at a certain point and it's like nothing can be counted on. And I've heard kind of this like schizo theory that like, oh, that's what they'll use. That's their open door to get in, digital ID, the idea that there'll be some kind of attempt to, link, permanently link, your public face with your online persona, which who knows? I'm not necessarily convinced, but I think it is interesting because I've already got to the point where it's like, I quite literally don't, like, you could show me an audio clip of anyone saying anything and I don't believe it, because I've heard a million of, Joe Biden edits of him reading out, like Thug Hunters or whatever, something stupid like that.
It's great in one sense because it almost turns the digital world into a desert. Like, it's very destructive in terms of the trust that it destroys. And if people can't go on online and trust anything that they see, like with Midjourney, or that they read with ChatGPT, or if there's something that they hear through a voice AI, then yeah, I mean, it does motivate people to go back to the real world, to the actual like meat space, you know? So I think it could be a positive thing in the long run for the exact opposite reasons that they're probably pushing the software. So
yeah, and this is something that I think is within our power to control. I think, what was it? The quote from Nick Land, who had said, "Nothing human makes it to the future. Nothing human survives in the future." It is within the power of even the most armchairist of dissidents to create an internet where nothing human exists on the internet, that we force reality back in the real world. And the internet exists, but it's kind of known as just a place where fake things are. And people can, which is, you know, in so many words, what the internet originally was back in like the 80s and 90s. The internet was kind of understood to be this place where people have alternate lives, alternate realities. They go crazy and kooky with things. And some people miss that, some people don't. I'm not doing the old head bit where we just talked about that, but I think that's something we could actually do is force real life off of the internet, because the social media revolution was trying to capture real life and bring it online, which is kind of what the digital ID thing is as well.
Yeah.
I also wonder if there will be something where kind of these AI technologies that are currently disparate, right? Well, we have essentially, image editing at your fingertips. We have audio editing at your fingertips. And obviously there's things like ChatGPT, and you have to wonder, like, well, what does the internet become when you can never be sure if it's a real person you're talking to, or just some kind of like program on a server somewhere,
Yeah.
And obviously that could extend both, not just in text, but in kind of like any format, right? Like there eventually, I assume, will be quote unquote like AI influencers, so to speak.
Oh yeah. See, there's every type of accelerationist you could want, but we have yet to see a hyper reality accelerationist. Yeah. We have yet to see the one who said, let's just go full fucking steam ahead and just make this as inhuman as possible, which will in essence preserve humanity elsewhere. But like you had said, there already are some AI influencers. And this is where, if I'm being a stinker, let me put on my Stephen Colbert hat and say that influencers these days are already as fake as you can get. Like that would be my commentary on influencer culture. I'm taking off my Stephen Colbert hat. But we did a whole arc on cybernetics on our show. We covered one of the books was by Marvin Minsky, and it's a fantastic book. And he was talking about the discussion is, how easy is it to replicate the human mind in a cybernetic space? And we could spend hours on this discussion. I'm not trying to take us down that spiral, but there is a point to be made that most people are not difficult to replicate, because there's that line from I, Robot, which is not a great movie, but I always come back to it, which is Will Smith is interrogating the robot, and he says, oh, can a robot paint a beautiful masterpiece? Can it write a sonnet? And the robot says, well, can you? It's essentially that most people are not difficult to replicate in an AI space. And I don't want to take this down a racial thing, but there's some groups I think would be easier to replicate in an AI space than others. Once you realize that, especially if you're taking into account like IQ level, personality, most people are kind of boring. It doesn't take a lot to trick a human. So the idea you could replicate an influencer who is essentially what an influencer now is. What if you made a human into a chatbot? So it wouldn't be hard to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think also that there's something to be said for the fact that this will be both a carrot and a stick, so to speak, right? Because, and you're right that I think especially as most people are not these kind of like radical dissidents, these people who truly do, kind of buck trends. Most people go along to get along. And to be honest, that's in their best interest. In most societies that would serve them quite well. But nonetheless, right, you can use, like you said, you can use the power of like an influencer, use the power of an AI to kind of cajole people positively. Like, here's something you should strive for, but also kind of negatively. And I think that a lot of the dialogue around Twitter bots got kind of destroyed by like shit libs mad that Hillary Clinton lost the election. But like, if you've been on Twitter, you have encountered bots before. You've encountered this like swarm of essentially like negative incredibly repetitive attention that doesn't really make sense. Like it happened a while back to a lot of guys, a lot of our, our friends, people in our spheres, where they essentially were getting kind of like errant bot swarms. They would tweet a word out and it would kind of relate to what the bots were saying, but the bots would be saying like anti-Q things, on people talking about like, vaccine side effects, which like, okay, there's kind of a crossover there, but those aren't the same people necessarily. But I think that as that technology gets more sophisticated, and because again, most people are pro-social in the sense that they want to do the accepted thing, I think that provides an incredible opportunity to essentially push culture and to push people in whatever direction you want.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, especially on the right, and when I say the right, I mean the broad right, and that's a big umbrella. A lot of them, and I'm not trying to pin this on any particular person, but a lot of people, I think, have this idea that power is that which lets itself be known. But truly advanced power and control doesn't really want you to know that it is in power and control. And so, like you had just said, there's this concept that might be a conspiracy theory, but once I describe it, you would say, well, why wouldn't they do this? It's the concept of heaven banning. So it's this idea that for uncomfortable or troublesome people, perhaps like ourselves, let's take Reddit, let's take Twitter, these examples. They can ban us, but when they ban us, we make a lot of noise and we cause a lot of trouble. What power doesn't want you to do, power doesn't want to have angry troublemakers. It wants compliance. And what's a good way to make troublemakers compliant? Well, it's not to punish them, it's not to make martyrs out of them. It's to kind of make them think that what they're doing is working. So heaven banning, it's this thing, they'll keep you on the platform if you have an account there, but it will slowly start to segregate you into almost a fake version of the site that's populated by bots. And you won't really know it. And you'll get your upvotes, you'll get your retweets, you'll get some sort of engagement, but you won't be aware that all you're dealing with is this sort of sequestered theme park that they made for you. And of course, it won't work on everyone. Of course, some people will clue into it, but a lot of them won't. And so some people will say, well, this is something that's been discussed. It's been theorized. Who knows if they're actually using it? I would say, why wouldn't they? That is an elegant solution for the problem of troublemakers. And once you start thinking like your opponent, if you think like your enemy, think, what would make me happy? It would make me feel like I'm being heard and liked and maybe even popular, but it doesn't matter. And so this is one of the reasons we were talking about completely polluting the digital space and polluting it in such a way where also the polluters are the only ones that will be able to navigate it. And what that will do, and again, this is all wild blue sky speculation, but what that would do is increase the importance of real life interaction. Now you can talk about this from a political perspective, a business perspective, whatever it might be. But there's already political groups in the scene right now. Maybe some we agree with, maybe some we don't agree with, doesn't matter. But they correctly have the focus on, you got to meet with people in real life. You got to network in real life. You got to rely on these relationships. And I think this might be a way to accomplish that and basically force people to get offline, because it's going to be like a burned out ruin that you can navigate, but you're going to be aware that the action is happening elsewhere. That was a bit of a long rant. Sorry.
There's another phenomenon. I was just thinking about this recently. Actually, we do this thing on our chat. When somebody joins the chat on Telegram, we immediately make them say an original racial slur, which is both to test the fact that they're not a bot for originality, and to test the fact that they're not a Fed or somebody who isn't, on our side enough to say the N-word or whatever. It's a stupid thing. But the point is, this kind of a hazing ritual, what we're doing is we're shit testing a stranger to make sure that they're one of us, or to try to identify them by pressurizing them socially, right? It's kind of like the Momo Ugun Thunderstrike thing when some Nigerian contacts you and you want to pressurize him, piss him off. And like in the Thunderstrike example, what's happened over time is there's been a net increase in the number of frustrated Nigerians, which is great. And I think generally as trust breaks down on the internet and we start to move back to the real, as that's happening, everybody not knowing who to trust is going to be shit testing and pressurizing everybody else all of the time, even people who would normally be your friends. And I think that's positive, right? So before we even move to the real, on the runway to the real, we're going to be increasingly pressurizing and shit testing and poking each other's buttons in ways that really question and draw out your principles and your beliefs and your humanity and make you rethink your positions, I think that's going to increase overall, even within closed groups where there are no bots. Just because there always could be a bot, or you don't know. It just seems to come up every conversation in the last few weeks. Like any one of us could be a voice AI. Any one of us in the chat could be Chat GPT. You don't know. So the only way that you can tell is by shit testing everybody all of the time. So.
Well, and also that's kind of what I was getting at. And just to that point, it might sound inelegant and crass, but I cannot recommend this enough to people. If you run a chat, make them say an original slur. Something, and original is the important part. It has worked so well in our chat. I mean, maybe we end up in jail tomorrow, but I know that there's been people who've like struggled with it. I'm like, well, get out. Like, and we're not the types of people who are like really bad with that. It's just funny. And the more funny it is, the better it is. But also to that point you just made, this would be the purpose of encouraging people to, like, you almost need to, the ultimate vetting is just meeting people in real life and saying that they're a real person, because in the heaven banning example, the fear is that you would be, grappling with an AI that can replicate human interaction. So you just want to be, for your sanity, you are going to need to be aware that the person you're talking to is real. And as far as I know, there's only one way to do that. And this won't be this year. This might be years down the road, but I don't necessarily see this stopping. And we're just trying to, I think the more people talking about practical solutions, the better it will be. And that's my position on it. I could be wrong, but I think the more, just one big brainstorming session is all we're doing.
So to me, it reminds me of a minor news story from 2016. Right. So I was still in high school, and this is when I considered such things to be, worthy of my attention. But some kind of whistleblower came out and basically said, look, Activision, the company that owns Call of Duty, has developed a system to essentially get you to pay for things in game, right? Get you to pay for skins. And the way they've done it is they have combined a combination of bots and matchmaking. So what they'll do is they'll try to funnel you into having a bad time. Right? They'll try to walk you up to losing over and over and over again. And then they will reverse that. They will give you a better time, right? You'll have a hot game, you'll have a hot streak after you buy something. And the idea is, from your side, all of these other accounts, it looks like, be like XXX Pussy Slayer 69, and obviously that's a real guy, or so you think, right? But in actuality, that's one of, like a dozen different bots all trained to essentially ruin your day until you buy something. And in a weird way, knowing that, and obviously part of it was also growing up, it ruined Call of Duty for me. Because I knew that I wasn't playing other people. I knew that the game wasn't what it said on the box, so to speak. And in a weird way, I think that you're kind of right that like once everyone is a bot, or everyone could be a bot. In a weird way, it fundamentally changes the nature of the game, quote unquote. And while I'm not entirely sure it's to our advantage, I do think that it does at least hopefully break down this kind of like horrible parasocial relationship so many people are cultivating. And maybe that's a vain hope, but it's something that I've been thinking about.
Well, that's a very fascinating story you just gave, because I think what I can extract from that is that we've already more or less crossed the Rubicon on this. And by that, I mean, it does, at this point, I don't even think it really matters if everyone or nobody is a bot. Enough people are aware and enough people are suspicious. The honeymoon's over. Like there's no way to unring this bell of AI. There's always going to be something in the back of our minds questioning our experience online. So for some people that might be higher, some people that might be lower, but I think things have inexorably changed. And, people are pretty excited about AI. And I think, the reason we bring this up, when confronted with a problem like this, typically many people on the right will try and look for ways to turn the clock back, or look for, hopefully in their mind, a larger bell that can unring a smaller bell, which doesn't even make sense when you phrase it like that. They're thinking like, how can we undo this? Whereas, people in our audience and many other audiences are thinking, okay, there's no going back. How can we utilize this technology or this movement for our benefit? Because right now, only the worst people in the world are trying to leverage it. And so we try and encourage people to be like, you can have a seat at this table. That's what's exciting about AI, even as demonic as it might be. There's a window of opportunity right when these things break, right when this technology is emerging, where it doesn't fucking matter how much money you have. The little guy can actually have a seat at the table and can understand this better than everyone else. That's what social media was, actually. That's what every exciting technology was at the start. And then it becomes shitty later. But there's a little bit of a Wild West window I think we have right now. It's going to be different than it was in the past with AI technologies because we don't really control them. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for enterprising and ambitious dissidents or anyone on our side of things to imagine ways where, this doesn't necessarily need to be an apocalypse, or if it is an apocalypse, it can be our apocalypse.
So do you think that this drives the normies back off the internet? Back to an era where, you don't post your face, you don't post your name, you don't post your information, away from kind of this era where you're incentivized to kind of give out as much of yourself as you can? Or do you think that's kind of a vain hope?
If it is, it will be us that drives them. Because the thing about normies is, and I hesitate to even use that term. I don't really like it. I understand that the way we use it, but because I work in marketing, so I tend to break down demographics a bit differently. But the thing about regular people, whatever you want to call them, is they don't tend to do anything on their own ever. Not especially if we're talking about libs or mainstream conservatives. They kind of go where they're directed to go. So if they leave the internet, it will be because our side either chased them off or lured them off. But they're a large group that gets corralled easily, and that can be good or that can be bad. The mistake I think a lot of dissidents or vanguardists make is that they want everyone out there to be like us, and they're not, and they shouldn't be. They're the ones who make a most of society. They're not the ones who take weird risks. They're not the ones who raise the stakes on esoteric shit. They're not usually the rule makers or the rule breakers. So they will stay plugged into whatever the system is. And if the system is give up Christ, go talk to these people. And again, another thing, I'm not trying to be too hard on the right, but a lot of people don't really interface much with the regular people out there. Some of them don't even have jobs or whatever. But once you talk to these people, the normies, they're pretty on board with everything. And if they don't like it, it's just hesitation. But for them to decouple from the system would be for them to separate from their entire world. And the majority of people on Earth aren't ready to do that. And I actually wouldn't demand them to, unless we had a viable alternative. I can't tell people to get fired. I can't tell people to rise up against the government. Most revolutions don't even do that. They lie after and say that they did, but they didn't really. So I think the only way they will uncouple from the internet is if we make it inhospitable for them, or if you make it scary or weird, or the things we complain about the internet is the thing they like about it. They like that's predictable. They like that's boring. Studies show that your average person simply revisits the same 4 to 6 websites every single day until they fucking die. But that's life. What are you going to do? So that's a very roundabout question to be say. I don't expect much, but I also don't demand much. If they do what I want them to do, it will because we succeeded at something. But I place faith in them to stand where the sun is shining, and not kind of wander into the esoteric darkness like we do.
So do either of you guys feel any sympathy for artists, right? Because if you've been on social media, and I'm not an avid user, but nonetheless, I have seen this kind of outcry of, AI is destroying artists, pay artists, pay artists, in kind of the similar shrieking tones to say, sex work is real work. You should pay for that as well. Do you feel sympathy for these people? Because on one hand, I kind of do, I get it. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that kind of enjoys the schadenfreude, I guess.
Well, what do you think? You lead with this one, Judas, because I know you have some ideas about this. I'll say some stuff, but I know you have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn because I'm adjacent to that industry, so I know a lot of artists. I know a lot of people who are really, really frightened right now. But I think like you kind of risk becoming a Luddite if you want to go there with it and say like, no, the way that it's always been is the way that it always should be. Because in fairness, art has become a low-hanging fruit since the invention of the computer. So most of you today who call yourselves artists would not have the tenacity or discipline to be an artist 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. You're an artist now because it was easy. I'm sorry that's offensive, but that's the truth. And that's why there's like every little small town has 6 graphic design agencies. So I think there will be a culling, and as unfortunate as it is, that's just what happens with technological progress rather. And I think the void, I'll call it a void, that AI art is filling is valuable. It is producing higher quality content rapidly and at a much lower cost. So it's good for people who are consumers of content. It's great for people who want to consume content. And in the long run, it may actually, like we're talking earlier about the shit testing of strangers in a chat or shit testing voice AI, you're going to start shit testing, maybe internally only, but shit testing visual art. So you're going to start really asking yourself, is there a division, or where do I draw the line between something that has real from an artistic standpoint and what is just, window dressing, what is just like big AI titties, and what is something that really speaks to me. And maybe there isn't a line for you, but I think for a lot of people, you're going to have to start really examining your foundational principles and your beliefs as relates to art. And you're going to have to start saying, this is why the painting on my wall that my grandfather got at a yard sale, even though it's not the favorite style that I like, it has more value to me than something that somebody did on Midjourney. I don't know. I think this is still developing. I think there's going to be 1,000 takes on this over the next year. And I think that I think my final point would be there are much more important, much more dangerous questions about AI generated visual art that have nothing to do with art as an industry. And I'm kind of sick at this point already of hearing small artists complain about them losing their meager paychecks. There's much more at stake than that. So
I want to jump in because that
can I
actually
say something really quick just before we move on, because this ends tonight. Is it pronounced Luddite or Luddite, Mr. Burden?
I've always assumed it's Luddite.
Exactly. Judas, how do you know what you said? First of all, tell the people at home, tell the folks at home, how do you say Canard?
Canard.
You asshole.
Sorry,
this is what I deal with.
This is wrong. I'm kind of tempted to kick you from this chat, Judah. This is highly inappropriate.
Do it, Jay.
I've done it live before, but since this is pre-recorded, the bit won't be quite as funny.
Yeah, without me, this chat would be really banal, though. He wouldn't want to do that.
Every day with this.
I'll put it this way. I take a somewhat Middle Eastern approach, and that is state enforced punishment by banality. Anyway.
Sorry, I cut you off there. So you continue. Sorry, I derailed.
So, but much like your point about influencers, right? Where you could say like, well, what realistically is the difference between this person as a skin and blood individual and an AI? You could kind of make the same point about art. Like how many people are there that essentially just draw, like regurgitated cal arts in kind of like a slightly, like altered style, or how many people draw, like Sonic fetish porn, in a way that is essentially legitimately and is completely, incomprehensible, or not incomprehensible, you can't tell the difference between what they would do and what Midjourney would put out.
Well,
and
that's interesting because Midjourney is censored, right? So it's funny that after the only sectors left for real flesh and blood artists will be like Sonic inflation porn and vor, right? Because Midjourney can't produce that; it can only produce good art. So
yeah, the only thing that humans were gonna be able to do is any fetish porn that's related to hands.
Yeah.
No, but
That's
Jay,
grim.
that's a very interesting point, and this is something we've discussed on the show at length, because we discuss art. My co-host Judas, he went to a pretty prestigious art school, and he's very good at. He'll deny this, but he's a very, very talented artist, and he's got tales from being in the belly of that beast, I believe. And I work in marketing, so I'm adjacent to an entire spectrum of hack graphic designers every single day. So we got scars on our K lines about this, but the problem that emerges, and I think this is a problem we can solve, and I want to stress that whenever I say things like this, I'm typically doing it from a position of positivity and hope, that nothing I prescribe, I think, is beyond our reach. So what I'm saying is AI is presenting a problem to human creative arts in that how can we outpace technology? How can we outpace an inhuman mind? And something emerged from that will probably make a lot of people very upset at me, but I don't care because I have enough love in my life. But one of the things was that the question is, Judas had very, very skillfully brought this up. How much human context can be coded in that art? For example, that picture in your grandfather's house, the painting that isn't your style, but you understand the human context from which that is given value. A human context theory of value. Let's get the Marxists on board. Okay. And so the question of the artist is, how can I outpace the high skill but low humanity? And what's interesting, what emerged from that I think will frustrate people is that all that modern art that everyone hates about museums, art museums, that's probably the most human stuff, because that is on the cutting edge. That art cannot be enjoyed in any way other than the human context. So when you go to these places, you see like who's a shitty artist? Not Jasper John, but some other modern artist. Jews might have some names, but it's just a fucking 4-year-old could do this. But the value is the context of the story of who made that, plus the setting you're seeing it in, plus the exchange that's happening between you trying to understand that art. Like, it's not about the art. It is this human experience, if that makes any sense.
My wife and I went to a gallery probably a month ago, and it was this middle-aged Japanese guy who had a math background, and he had like the massive 4 by 8 foot just papers all like taped together on the wall. And he had written, and I guess ballpoint pen, and then alternating between pen and then a fountain, like an ink pen, just multiplication tables of different variables, just over and over and over. But when the series of numbers would run out, he would move on to the next one. And then when you stand on the other side of the room, the series and the density of the fractions, so the density of the fractions within the cell on this graph paper and the locations of the series on the page created these really weird contemporary abstract forms, but they literally are just series of fractional calculations that he did with a calculator and wrote in pen on a giant sheet. So and I wouldn't even know what I'm looking at, and I wouldn't be able to tell you that if I hadn't have read the bio on the way in and stood at it and talked to my wife about it for 10 minutes, kind of scratching my head. But here I am talking to you guys about it, and I remember the guy's face now, even now talking about it. So, I mean, this is not, if Midjourney produced that, I would think I would look for an error code, because there's no context at all. So.
Sorry, I had myself muted. So, that's a very, very good point. What we're really talking about, and this is the problem that is presented to not only every visual artist. I don't want that it's every visual artist, it's every writer, it's every voice actor, increasingly, obviously. It's that asking and answering the question, what is the human context that I can create with this art? And I think what a lot of people are responding to negatively about, what's the art we got now? If you're an artist, a graphic designer, you're making furry porn, because the human context of everything we create now is abhorrent. The fact is that, and that's in a way, that's what we're responding to, that nothing we create right now is even good or positive. It's all fucking fetish shit. It's all sarcastic. It's all ironic. So when we ask the question, what is the humanity we're coding into this? We don't even like the humanity we're bringing to the table. Why is it that no right winger can write a story that is not dystopian? Why can we not write a story? How many stories are, I've said this before, people are going to be throwing tomatoes at the screen, but like how many, if I see another short story set in Wymerica, I'm going to blow my fucking brains out. Like no one is even capable of bringing any humanity to the table that ought to occupy art. And that's any great art has that context. So I think where the power might lie in us is we need to figure out what is the context we can employ to always outpace because the AI is always going to have skill, even though it kind of looks goofy right now. That's not going to last very long. You think that that's not going to figure out how to do hands, faggots? Yeah, it's going to figure it out. So that when that day comes, you're going to need to pace faster, and we're going to ask very strange questions about how we make the human soul relevant in representation. And that to me is exciting. That to me is a real problem. And what we're revealing is I don't think a lot of artists know how to answer that question. So maybe they should be changing tires. Maybe we have, like Judith said, maybe we have too many fucking graphic designers. Maybe you're either a furry artist or you sell flowers on the corner and you actually can't apply your shitty art skills to anything human. So you're trying to figure out how can we make this inhuman machine run better? Why can't I make more money producing filth? It's because you're not fucking capable of making anything that's good anyway. So to that point, I'm happy that I don't know what percentage is going to be. There's going to be a sizable percentage of people who cannot make art anymore because they had no fucking business to do it to begin with, because they were just using art as a way to get some wicked, black, sick thought into the world. That's a bit of another rant too. I apologize if that's too much.
Well, I think that you're onto something, that art is contextual to a certain degree, and that there is art that art sort of makes sense in the context in which it was made. And I see something on the right that kind of rubs me the wrong way, and it's this kind of ghost dancing behavior. So by ghost dancing, I'm kind of referring to the Plains Indians, right? Who as they were being pushed back, kind of would return to ever more elaborate religious rituals. And when I explained, the thought behind it was essentially like, well, when we were in charge, when we ruled the plains, this is what we did. So the way to get back there, to get back to us being on top, is to just do the old thing more. Which is kind of, again, putting the cart before the horse to really, add another layer of tortured metaphor. And you sort of see it around around quote unquote trad art, around this kind of like Thomas Kincaid or like Norman Rockwell version of art, which, don't get me wrong, it made sense in its context, but wishing to essentially, well, we will produce quote unquote trad art and therefore produce a trad world, I think is sort of backwards, because at least there's some degree of art which is descriptive, right? Is reacting to something in the world, at least from my perspective.
That's absolutely true. And Judas, I'll let you go in a second, but this is something I've got a lot of words I put into in the past. So I'll try and summarize it. And I'll preface it by saying that, when we say what I'm about to say, I'm not anti-trad, and I'm not anti-tradition. I'm not anti-history. I think historical literacy is probably the best thing we got going for us in this scene right now. And I think there's a lot of great minds in our scene who are kind of parsing through history, maybe even including ourselves, but like the heavy hitters, like Thomas 777's big into this. So I think it's good to have a historical knowledge, but you pinpoint a real problem we have, which is that when this is where the hyper reality comes in, the simulacra, where it's like, yes, you are reproducing. Now, does anyone really feel anything when they see another fucking Greco-Roman meme with vaporwave over top? No one feels anything. So the problem is that we're pretty good at making memes. We're the best at making memes. And the problem is that most of what we produce is elevating memes. There's a lot of short stories that are just fleshed out green texts, but it's lacking something. It's lacking that the jouissance, the joie de vivre, as many say. And then we don't know what to do with that. We're like, don't you want to walk with your wife through a wheat field? No one fucking does. If you say you do, you're lying. I get that you hate the modern world, but you can't lie and say you look at this fucking stock photography. That's all it is. No one's taking these photographs for these memes, guys. It's all stock photography that you're fawning over, which is a very strange, hyper-real thing to think of once you really start to consider it. But if you want a trad lifestyle, if you want to get back to nature, that's one thing. But if you're saying like, man, I wish I was a Roman. No, you don't. That might as well be an alien species to where you are right now. If you say you want to go back in time, that means you don't understand history. You are ill-equipped psychologically, biologically. You can't live back then. I don't care how many fucking weights you lift. You know, they're like a different species entirely with a different mindset. And this is before we get into like the Julian Jaynes breakdown, the bicameral mind stuff. Like your brain is shaped differently as well. But looking backwards, I think we've been doing that long enough. And again, I think there's a lot we can learn from the past. There's a lot we can trawl out, a lot of lessons, a lot of values, a lot of lifestyles. However, if you're always looking back, you're making yourself easy to be oppressed. That's all you're really doing. You're not trying to utilize the tools to perhaps carve out a space for yourself in the future. And that's really what we're talking about. And this is where this has happened throughout history, and every single fucking time these people have been steamrolled by what they call progress. It's not really progress. It's just having being in the game and playing and not just shutting your ears to everything. So I think people can start by being honest by saying like, I get that we like beauty. I get that we like aesthetics and we can like it, but really most of the backwards facing stuff that we kind of pass between each other, like fucking trading cards, I don't think most people feel that in their soul. I really don't. And people can push back on me as much as they want, but I think what it triggers them to start imagining things in their head. But like, I don't think the art is that evocative. Now, call me crazy. What do you think about that?
So my idea is that the concept of, you know, the left can't meme is actually completely incorrect, because I think that the right wins online meme culture, but the left wins cultural memes. So, for instance, the idea is like the reason that, you know, a phrase like reverse racism exists is that essentially it's a massively successful cultural meme that kind of just by saying that largely kind of, at least, you know, in an effective sense, kind of discredits your argument. So I think that both the left and the right are engaged in memes, so to speak, but the right, being kind of the weaker party in this, is kind of engaging at, you know, kind of like these memes which are, you know, more comedy focused, that they are fun. They're designed to kind of pull you away from a more powerful force. And whereas it's harder to say, well, okay, well, what is a left-wing meme in a comedic sense? Well, we can all think of the phrases like hands up, don't shoot, you know, like nevertheless, she persisted. And many of these have become kind of cringe, but the very powerful ones, you know, like I'm trying to think, oh yeah, like say her name, things like that, you know, that, okay, maybe it's not quite as funny as, you know, as Clown World, you know, or some kind of like Peppo edit, you know, but nonetheless, they have a lot of like power to them.
That's true. It depends if you are defining meme in the classical sense, as in like the Richard Dawkins, like what is a meme? A meme is an ideological organism that propagates. So that is, if we're kind of defining it that way, is any idea that propagates like a virus successfully. That's true. There might be a way to delineate between our memes, which tend to be more generative from the base, and then a lot of the leftist memes, which literally are just boardroom marketing rolled out by some think tank. They operate a bit differently because, you know, and also it depends how we define the left. So, you know, when we spoke to Spandrel recently, you know, he kind of pioneered that term bio-Leninism. A great number of people, Edward Dutton probably does this too, define the left broadly as just this sort of, you know, the virus, these misfits, these biological dead ends that are just, it's not even really an ideology. It's not even really a group. So if you define it like that, that's one thing. But if we want to say the left broadly as like shit libs and progressives, and we just want to localize it to the intelligent ones and forget all the spiteful mutants and all that, you know, their memes, I don't even think they do that many memes. I think they just have like focus chants. They have chants, but I don't think they can be. But therein lies the strength. that they don't make memes. Perhaps I've been coming around to the idea that we're very good at memes. And what are our memes? Well, they're entertainment. And 9 times out of 10, people on the right hate entertainment because it pacifies you, it makes you docile, it leads you down blind alleys that psychologically they shouldn't go through. It's like, yeah, we're very, very good at entertaining ourselves with memes. We're good at spoofing. We're good at, talking about the news and saying, hey, isn't that gay thing's pretty gay? And then we laugh and then nothing happens. So there might be an argument to be that the left doesn't meme. What the left and the progressives do, or at least the leftist strategists do, is they create marketing plans and they create marching orders for their paid operatives, and that kind of disseminates to the public. And what you're really seeing is it's 2 different strategies in action. One is arguably more organic and one is inorganic. And because it's inorganic, that's why it keeps winning. And that's one thing Spandrel had said when I spoke to him. I do think this is true, that I think it's true to a degree. I'm not sure, but he said, the left has essentially won every battle it's ever fought. The reason we are the way that we are in this sort of degenerative society is because they've more or less won every battle. And you can blame conservatives, you can blame, unfair circumstances, but it's like, I have to believe it's because they're playing a different game than we're playing. And so it's not even really a meme war. And perhaps it's the memes that kind of keep us going in circles. But again, that sounds a bit too black-pilling, maybe. What do you think about that?
So what I think, and Spandrel and a lot of the original like NRX crowd are 100% right in this, is that one of their main contentions, whether we Moldbug or Land or Spandrel, is that the left and the right are not, this is not a dualistic system. This is not a contest between equal forces who operate in the same way. And I think that you're 100% correct. We are not playing the same game. And this is always my frustration with people who essentially want to do like a long march through the institution, but based, or we want to do new leftism, but for us, is that while I applaud the creativity in it, there's a part of me that just, I don't believe certain tool, much like there is an ideology kind of baked into technology. I'll just accept that as a premise for the moment. I think that in tactics, there is kind of an ideological bent to them, and if we accept the definition of the right as order and the left as chaos, or nomian and antinomian, whatever terms you want to use, there are certain tactics that I think only work if you're aligned with entropy. And I think that maybe, memes and the different ways that we approach memes are kind of downstream of that distinction, so to speak.
No, I agree completely with that. One thing we had discussed on the show, we did a whole arc about quantum mechanics and the history of scientific development. And one thing that stood out is that when we talk about a paradigm shift, and this is something that a lot of people talk about, but they don't really know what it means. What is a paradigm shift? It kind of changes how you see the world. It is a tectonic social shift. And you see this a lot in the sciences about the development of our understanding, like the development of quantum physics, the discovery of that period changed how we do everything. But what's interesting is that once you see a paradigm in crisis, there's this idea in science that whenever a new theory comes along, that's just adopted. It's not. It is a knife fight. It is brutal. You've got vanguards of the old way trying to fight it out in the press, behind the scenes. They're trying to sabotage each other's experiments. Like imagine the Edison and Tesla stuff, but everybody. That's what it is. It's a brawl when a new system upsets the old one, partly because their careers are on the line or their reputation is on the line. But usually when a paradigm is in crisis, when it can no longer answer questions that are posed by the real world. With physics, it was like, the way we thought we calculate the rotation of the Earth doesn't make sense anymore. We're taking into account different types of distances and bodies. It doesn't make sense. We can't describe the world anymore, so we need a new thing. And then there is a point of chaos where people are just trying out all kinds of new shit. Before we settled on, various theories about gravity, we had all these ideas about what gravity was, and there's still some debate about electromagnetism. If you're talking to like flat Earth people, that's a whole other thing. But there's all these what the point is that people are testing out theories. It'll seem like chaos until one emerges that kind of settles it, and then it kind of dies down. But I really do think that's where we're in right now. We are in a flashpoint. We're in a point where, especially in the distant right, I know a few people have marked on this. I think Mike from Imperium Press, who's I'm a good admirer of, he had mentioned that this is a very exciting time. I don't know if people realize that. Just take a second and realize this sort of soup that we're all swimming in. There's some of the most interesting and brilliant people, I think, that are available on the market right now in our scene, talking about some wild fucking ideas. They're not all going to be correct, but I don't see this really as a point of decay. I think a new paradigm will emerge from this, like we're talking about with AI. The current ideologies and paradigms we have right now don't really know how to grapple with AI. And there's a lot of people in our scene right now who are kind of plugging the ears and hoping it goes away, hoping it fails, not paying attention to it, saying it's a distraction, whatever. But there's people who are like trying to figure out what this new world is. And I don't think it's total decay. I think we're just in a very exciting time where the right people are asking the right questions, and it's going to get ugly and people are going to say a bunch of weird shit. But I do think there's a way out of this. And that applies to art, that applies to jobs, that applies to commerce, that applies to kind of everything we're talking about.
Well, we're coming up on time, and I think that's a good kind of hopeful note to leave things on. Jesus, I cannot speak tonight, because I think that you're right, that there is kind of a sense, right? And I've been reading DeMaester recently, and kind of thinking on kind of what change is like, in the sense that there does come a point at which the internal contradictions in a system have to be addressed. It just is not workable. And the process of something new being born is at once kind of scary and exciting. And I think, especially as a younger man, there's a lot to be gained in that. That we're kind of in a system, and you see this even in our rulers, right? It's essentially a bunch of, calcified octogenarians. It's very much like, kind of like the aging Soviet Union in the 80s or 90s, ruled by these kind of, geriatric old political commissars. But there is an opportunity in this, and I think that you're right, that our spheres are filled with interesting people, presenting interesting ideas, and there's a lot to be gained. There's a lot to be kind of discovered. There's an adventure to this, and I think that it's very easy. And just look at my my avatar here, to kind of just like, put your head in your hands and say, oh, well, it's, it's all falling apart. But within that, there is kind of an opportunity. And so we have successfully gone this entire show without describing, who you guys are and what you do.
That's why,
which again, I don't mind. But if you could, as we start to wrap this up, could you guys, describe, what you do and where people can find you?
Judas, you start first, because I've been a blowhard this whole time.
Oh shit, I don't know. I'm Judas. I'm the co-host of the BloodSatellite podcast. We're the Bad Optics Leaf Gods, and we are the only Canadian podcast. So don't listen to any others. If you hear about them, ignore them.
It'd be funny if he doxed himself right there.
His full social security number, mother's maiden name, date of birth, and the 3 digits on the back.
I hear him taking out his fucking wallet, like no.
Dox myself to own the libs.
So I'm Dimes. I'm a co-host of the BloodSatellite show. You can find us on bloodsatellite.ca. That's our website. You'll find all the old episodes on there, full episodes. Each episode goes pretty long, because each episode we review a book, and we also interview a fascinating guest. Those are the full episodes. We also have clips that are much, much shorter, up on YouTube and up on Odyssey. I also have recently launched a website called the vanguardistjournal.org. And there, the reason I bring that up is because we're publishing articles that are based off of a lot of the stuff we talk about on the show, philosophy, cybernetics, things like that. It's very, very exciting. And we're diving into these ideas in a way that's a bit less full of curses and threats. So a bit more seriously, that's a project that we're working on. So yes, bloodsatellite.ca. Everyone check that out. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, if you like curses and threats. If you don't like those, then go to the website Vanguardist. Yeah.
I think we killed Jay. Is he still there, or is it me, or is he not there?
I can't hear him. Mr. B. It's all right.
Is everything okay?
This is our house now.
All right. So what have you been up to lately?
Just hanging out
We're gonna
on the AI.
Did you watch Skinamarink yet?
No, I'm not fucking watching that shit.
Okay, because we're gonna talk about it. You
No.
know what? I think you might like it. Okay, I'm gonna give you the just brief headline. It's not a good movie, but I think everyone should see it. Now, what do you think
All
about
right.
that?
You say that about every terrible movie in Movie Corner.
Okay,
JB's gone.
he is
This is
gone.
now the Blood Satellite podcast. Welcome back, folks. It is Wednesday night, 9 o'clock. This is February 15th, 2023. You were listening to Blood Satellite, and we are the Bold Boys.
All right, let's talk Biden. Let's talk. Let's talk. What trans stuff is going on?
Oh no!
I desperately hope he keeps this in. I will be livid if he cuts this out.
What do we do? Do we stay?
I think because he controls the. Actually, if I leave studio, no, I want to wait till he gets back. I want to see if he emails.
I want
me
to say
too.
thank you at least.
I do. He was very good. I like him.
Yeah, it's a good program.
Yeah. Did you see any good movies lately, though? There's this one I want to see. You know what we should do? Let's do something that we've never done before. Let's both watch a movie before we discuss it.
Okay, and let's do it right now on the Jay Burden show. Let's see how many copyright infringements we can rack up before he comes back.
What's the J stand for? Just heading out for a pack of smokes? What's the J stand for? Just doing a Holocaust? Just lynching? Jesus.
If you make it just, it could be anything. It's really about the middle name.
Oh, fuck. We did it. Someone's going to fuck with him and call him Just Burden and do like the Just meme.
Just Burden.
You're the best thing I heard. You know, I don't know if this will be lost on you. You don't follow hip hop or anything, but there was this artist named Kid Cudi, and pretty famous artist, right? Worked with Kanye West, but there was a big blow up between the two. And it was just, I saw a screenshot of someone making fun of him. It just said Mid Cudi.
There he is.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I'll just end the recording and I'll just add that in post.
No worries.
So we were just
Hey guys, it's Jay here. As you probably heard, we had some technical difficulties where my internet, kicked out in the middle of, wrapping up the show with the Blood Satellite guys. So this is just, me coming back around to finish up the episode. Again, thanks for bearing with us. I try to avoid these technical difficulties, but they do happen all the same. So again, thank you guys so much for coming out. And remember, keep your head up. The lie can't last forever. Good night.